Wibta for not accepting my Mill's apology. She apologized because I was mad, not because she was actually sorry. I have shared multiple times here regarding my future mother-in-law, and I am here to provide the complete story. This post consists of over a year's worth of content, so I apologize in advance for its length. Summary: my mother-in-law's negligence and inconsideration nearly cost my dog her life. My frustration over this situation led her to ask my fiancé whether he was certain about marrying me. She apologized, but only because I remain upset with her, not because she recognized that her behavior was inappropriate. My fiancé, 27 years old, male, and I, 27 years old, female, have been together for nearly 8 years. We have been in a relationship since we were 19, and as I am effectively an orphan, I have spent considerable time with his family. His parents have essentially adopted me, and given that I live with a chronic illness, his mother would accompany me to medical appointments and tests. She referred to me as her daughter-in-law for years before our engagement. A year into our relationship, my fiancé and I adopted a dog named Charlie, who is now almost 7 years old. It is important to note that my fiancé and I reside with his parents, and he has never lived anywhere else. Charlie has only known this environment. We began searching for houses 2 years ago, but sadly are still in the process. We submitted an offer on a house about a year ago, but it did not work out. Nonetheless, this situation made my mother-in-law realize that when we do eventually move out, we will take our dog with us. Consequently, she became determined to get a dog for herself. Charlie suffers from chronic anxiety, so my fiancé, father-in-law, and I established some guidelines for my mother-in-law while searching for a dog. The guidelines were as follows. 1. Not a male dog. This is simply a preference after we encountered a male dog that persistently humped Charlie. 2. Not a puppy. Despite her wanting a young dog, we had observed her interactions with her other pets and knew she would not provide a puppy with the attention it required. 3. Not an allergenic breed. My fiancé and father-in-law are allergic to many types of dogs, making this requirement non-negotiable. Over the course of a month, we viewed 3 or 4 different dogs, but either they were not compatible with Charlie or someone had an allergic reaction. For the most part, my mother-in-law adhered to the guidelines, but then she sent us a profile for a 4-month-old male doodle. All 3 of us said no to this option, but she insisted that we either accompany her to meet him or she would go alone and bring him home if she liked him. Consequently, we were compelled to visit a dog that did not meet any of the established criteria. Additionally, we reiterated our objections in the rescue, to the point where the rescue staff pointed out that she didn't have to adopt the dog if she did not want to. My father-in-law began to feel anxious because he was against adopting the dog, and my mother-in-law took advantage of his desire to leave, ultimately adopting the dog. The only circumstances under which the dog could be returned were: 1. If anyone was allergic. 2. If Charlie experienced any issues. My mother-in-law did not and has still not taken any action to train the dog. He does not listen at all. She did sign him up for a Pet Smart class after we expressed our frustration with her, but it served as a mere token gesture, and he remains just as untrained. The course consisted of only 8 sessions, and they skipped one because she did not want to attend. I have never seen her practice with him. Over the course of a year, she has not taken him for a single walk, simply letting him outside. I have never witnessed her play with the dog, which has led him to bring me his toy when I enter the room. Less than a month after bringing the puppy home, Charlie began to pass blood in her stool. We took her to the veterinarian, who diagnosed her with stress ulcers. As a result of this condition, she developed foul burps. Consequently, she was both defecating blood and regurgitating her intestinal lining. The vet prescribed Prozac for her. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law's response to this situation was not to recognize that my decisions had adversely affected another living being. Instead, she continued with her usual behavior. Her dog continued to eat everything in sight, and she even allowed him to rummage through garbage simply to enjoy a few minutes of peace. At some point, we discovered that my father-in-law was also allergic, yet she still refused to part with the dog. While we never requested that she do so, we had previously established an agreement, so it raised a question about her priorities. As a result of these issues, nobody but my mother-in-law has a positive relationship with the dog. Charlie experienced a severe reaction to the Prozac, resulting in serotonin syndrome. She lost 10 pounds in a month, became lethargic, and nearly died. While it was not my mother-in-law's fault that we could not have anticipated this reaction, it remains a troubling situation. We chose not to inform them that Charlie had almost died because we did not want them to feel guilty, but they were aware of her illness. Yet, this knowledge did not compel my mother-in-law to change her behavior. My fiancé and I have gone to great lengths to keep the two dogs separated, as my mother-in-law does not bother to do so. Her dog often uses Charlie as a chew toy, jumping on her, among other things. In our efforts to keep the two dogs apart, my mother-in-law accused us of being unkind to hers. We have not harmed her dog in any way. We simply push him away or raise our voices to deter him. To clarify, we do refer to him using unflattering names, which I acknowledge is inappropriate, but we are in a challenging situation. Such comments have led her to label me an animal abuser repeatedly. My mother-in-law tends to attribute Charlie's anxiety to anything other than her dog. Yes, Charlie has always been anxious, but not to the extent of passing blood. That issue only became apparent after her becoming a target for my mother-in-law's dog. My mother-in-law has been quick to suggest explanations, such as she is just anxious because of the earthquake, or there must have been a snake in the yard, or fireworks had her worked up, essentially blaming our dog's decline on everything but her actions. While we understand that accepting responsibility can be uncomfortable, it is ultimately her responsibility. At the beginning of January, after hearing one of those comments, I snapped after enduring this for an entire year, and told her that she would do anything to avoid taking responsibility for the situation. This escalated into a full argument, which concluded with her labeling me an animal abuser once more, and going as far as to express her fear of leaving me alone with her dog, as she believes I might harm him. To clarify, I have never injured this dog and work hard to avoid any interaction with him. She also looked my fiancé square in the eye and asked him whether he was certain about marrying me. I would like to remind you that my mother-in-law and I were once close friends prior to this situation, and she had never before expressed any doubts regarding our relationship. A day later, we reconvened and informed them that Charlie had nearly died, prompting an almost dismissive response of "Now your anger makes sense." Once again, nothing changed on her part. My fiancé prepared a plan designed to help Charlie, which primarily addressed how to manage her dog, including playing with him and taking him on walks. As previously mentioned, she has never taken him for a walk, but following this discussion, she purchased a toy for him that she claimed was as good as a walk. She won't even throw a toy for him outside. Unsurprisingly, no changes occurred because of this. My fiancé led her directly to an apology for her hurtful remarks made about me, but she doubled down on all her statements. She even suggested that her comment about my fiancé's marriage intentions was acceptable because she phrased it as "I know you think you love her, but are you sure?" Moreover, she asserted that her therapist has suggested I intentionally create tension so she would be unkind to me, allowing me to cry to my fiancé and manipulate him into distancing himself from her, which is not accurate at all. I continue to feel justifiably angry because this is incredibly unreasonable. We are scheduled to marry in 6 months, and she makes such comments. At this point, I am not being snarky. I am simply trying to manage my emotions. Consequently, my mental health has deteriorated, and I have had to begin additional medication. When she noticed I was upset, she asked my fiancé how she could make it better. He told her to apologize. She attempted to apologize, stating her desire to resolve the situation, and I responded that it is difficult to mend things when she tried to undermine our relationship after nearly 8 years, just 6 months before our wedding, due to my dislike for her dog. She insisted that she never intended to create discord and claimed I was misinterpreting her words. When I asked her what her intentions were, she failed to provide any response. In my opinion, that doesn't qualify as an apology. What else could her question, "Are you sure about marrying her?" signify if not to sow seeds of doubt? Since then, I have remained quietly frustrated. My mental health continues to suffer. I have lost 20 pounds because I am psychologically overwhelmed, and when she inquired about my well-being, my fiancé responded that she is just stressed about the wedding, as mentioning that she is the cause of my distress would only exacerbate the conflict. It has now been over a month without any further apologies from her, so I do not expect one. My fiancé and I have discussed it in depth and agreed that if she were to apologize now, it would come across as disingenuous, as she would only be doing so due to my lingering upset rather than for her offensive comments. She had 2 chances to apologize immediately after her remarks, and she failed to do so. We have decided that this is simply the way things are now, which is disheartening but manageable. The in-laws are planning a vacation, and my sister-in-law will be taking their dog, thank goodness. They still have an older cat that I assumed we would be watching. I wouldn't typically mind, but I told my fiancé that I cannot believe she would entrust an animal abuser with her cat. Today, she asked me to look after the cat, and I reiterated my feelings. She insisted she never called me an animal abuser, despite having done so 3 times, with my fiancé backing me up on that, adding gaslighting to the list. She then apologized for her previous remarks, claiming she will always love me and only wants to mend our relationship. While I am not inherently against reconciliation, I am so fatigued by this dynamic that I no longer care. I told her what my fiancé and I had discussed, that she was only apologizing now because I am visibly upset, not because she acknowledged the inappropriateness of her earlier statements. According to her, I am an animal abuser while I administer 12 medications daily to prevent my dog from suffering from internal bleeding. Am I the antagonist for refusing to accept her apology? I do not believe I am, as it feels insincere. She appears to be apologizing solely because I am still emotionally affected, not due to the impact of her actions. In an unrelated matter but relevant in this context, she inquired about the colors for our wedding, and I informed her it would be gold, silver, gray, and blue. She subsequently ordered 3 black dresses. I highly doubt it is a mere coincidence that she attempted to undermine our relationship, did not succeed, and is now dressing as if our wedding is a funeral. I genuinely do not want her at our wedding. I do not want to spend the day taking pictures with her while she pretends to be excited for us when she has explicitly expressed the opposite multiple times. Please do not suggest that the solution is for us to move out. We are aware of this and are in the process of doing so. We preferred a house over an apartment. However, at this point, we have caved and are also considering apartments. Update regarding the dress situation. She recently received an off-white gown with gold tulle and a train, asking if it was acceptable or if it appeared too bride-like. If you even have to ask that, then the answer is definitely yes. I asked her whether she would be comfortable with others mistaking her for the bride, and she affirmed that she would be fine with it. You can interpret that however you wish. Edit. For everyone stating that placing one offer on a house does not constitute searching, we have made multiple offers. This was simply the one that initiated this entire situation. My fiancé is in a union, and when he finishes a job, he is placed on a list and doesn't get assigned to a new project until he reaches the top. During this period, he can collect unemployment, but we cannot purchase or rent anything. If we already had a place, it would be manageable, but we cannot simply buy something while on unemployment, as this is a lender's requirement. Thus, over 2 years of searching, we have taken 3 3-month breaks due to his unemployment. He has recently returned to work, so we need to wait a month for him to obtain pay stubs before we can start looking again. Do you assert authority over what she can do in her own home? This is a counterargument based on the fact that her husband was also involved in this situation, and the stipulations were aimed at ensuring either Charlie's well-being or protecting her husband and son. Are we not in a troubling situation whereby my father-in-law would need to take antihistamines for the next 15 years due to my mother-in-law's decision to acquire a dog that he did not desire and to which he is allergic? Am I the antagonist for calling her dog stupid and ugly? Fair enough. I have ceased that behavior and have even acknowledged that it was inappropriate. For those suggesting I should be angry at my mother-in-law rather than the dog, that is an even worse position. There is no easy solution here. Did you offer to help with her dog? Yes, we did not merely complain about his lack of training. We provided her with our training materials, clickers, treats, and shared various books and YouTube series that had been effective for us. We told her that if she needed assistance, she should reach out, but we were not willing to carry out the training on her behalf, which we believe is a reasonable stance. Helping is one thing, but why should the burden of training her dog fall solely on us? Regardless, she has not utilized any of the resources we provided or requested assistance. She does own a correction collar for him that either vibrates or beeps. It does not deliver electric shocks, but the battery is often dead, or the collar isn't even being used. If it is on him, the beeping and vibrations do not dissuade him. She suggested that we carry the remote around, thinking it would deter him from bothering Charlie because he feared the remote. He does not. Do you contribute to rent, bills, or have you relied on them for support? We do pay rent and the electric bill while taking on all household chores. I have only been living with them for 3 years, so it is inaccurate for anyone to assert that I have been depending on them for nearly a decade. That is simply not the reality. I acknowledge that we should have moved out by now and have been requesting this for years, but my fiancé remains adamant about preferring a house to an apartment. As previously mentioned, due to his job situation, we have encountered difficulties. However, he has recently started looking at apartments as well, which is not ideal but a step up from our current situation. Regarding the concerns about my feelings toward her dresses, I am entitled to my feelings. While none of the dresses may be inherently bad, I find myself lacking patience for her behavior in general due to everything that has transpired. Her navy dresses, which are a separate issue, appear black in real life, but they are a very dark navy. The gold dress is not necessarily offensive, but I informed her that my wedding attire would include gold. She then purchased a gold dress, which also came in 2 blue shades that would have been acceptable. Her assertion that she believed she appeared to be a bride and was comfortable with the notion suggests that she is aware of how bridal it looks, but I may not have interpreted it that way. I deleted the post regarding the gold dress because people reacted negatively, and I was overwhelmed and stressed. If you were fundamentally an orphan, why did you cease contact with your family 3 years ago? I was already in a low-contact situation with them prior to that. It wasn't as though I decided one day that I no longer wanted to communicate with them. There is a history of abuse that warranted the involvement of child protective services during my middle and high school years. When my fiancé and I began dating, I was still living with my parents, but spent nearly all my free time at his home. It was refreshing to experience peace and do things like take a nap without facing criticism. For those suggesting that my mother-in-law gradually realized something was off, she has endured harassment from my mother due to my mother's jealousy regarding our relationship. Her behavior has been simply spiteful and rude, characterized by statements like, "You are taking my daughter away from me," and "Why does she love you but not me?" I wonder, perhaps because my mother-in-law has never burned my back with her cigarette butts, just a thought. As for the allergies with German shepherds, my mother-in-law's dog is a mix, primarily featuring shepherd characteristics. We understand the irony that neither my fiancé nor his father is allergic to Charlie, yet my mother-in-law's dog is a poodle Rottweiler mix. While he isn't entirely hypoallergenic, both my father-in-law and fiancé are allergic to something in their saliva, rather than dander. They are not allergic to Charlie, but they are allergic to my sister-in-law's Corgi Collie mix. I will continue to update this portion with any commonly asked questions and hope this clarifies some of the details. Story 2. My 23M mother, 56F, is very needy and dependent. The problematic origin of this behavior. For some context, my family has been experiencing significant emotional struggles since my father passed away from a heart attack 2 years ago. This event had a profound effect on my mother, leading to an increase in her alcohol consumption. Consequently, she often woke up feeling unwell, missed work, and became quite dependent on my brother and me. I was unemployed when my father died, so I was happy to help out around the house, especially since my mother was kind enough not to charge me rent. While I searched for truck driving jobs, having obtained my commercial driver's license 6 weeks after my father's death, I also assisted with household tasks and ran errands for her, which made sense given the situation I was in. Unfortunately, things began to spiral out of control. In late 2023, I returned home after discovering that truck driving wasn't the right fit for me. A few months later, I decided to sign up for DoorDash and drive full-time, hoping to earn some money and get out of the house more often. However, by this point, my mother's alcoholism had escalated, and she was consuming several boxes of wine each day. She constantly asked me to stop at the store for groceries, but I often ended up purchasing wine during those trips. This disrupted my schedule and impacted my income due to reduced productivity. All I wanted was to feel self-sufficient. She began requesting that my brother or I drive her to work, and it became clear that she was now drinking in the morning. After a while, I dreaded speaking with her because I anticipated the same repetitive conversations. To avoid her demands, I started sneaking out to DoorDash. However, she would call me, questioning my absence and asking for more wine and groceries. It frustrated me that she took advantage of my flexible work schedule. I hesitated to confront her about my annoyance, as I didn't want to come across as selfish. I still loved my mother, but this internal struggle caused me significant stress. I started a pest control job in late March 2024, and even during my shifts, she would call, wanting to know when I could pick her up or get her wine. In June, I was fired for reasons I won't elaborate on here, leading me back to DoorDash full-time. Her nagging behavior intensified, and my car was starting to suffer from the wear and tear of all the driving, adding to my stress. By this time, I had already communicated my feelings about her being a needy alcoholic, though it may sound harsh. It is the truth. Despite my brother and me expressing our concerns, she showed little interest in changing her lifestyle. Flash forward to January 2025. My friends and I had completed considerable work on my car, which was now running better, and I felt confident that I could support myself solely through my driving jobs. I had saved around $4,000 and decided that I could no longer endure my situation with my mother. I moved out to a place about 20 minutes away in the country, sharing a house with 3 roommates to keep my expenses manageable. I thought that living apart might motivate her to finally change her habits and take care of herself. I was mistaken. She would call me while I was dashing, asking me to come back home to show the delivery driver my identification so she could obtain her wine. Her driver's license had expired in October 2024, and she refused to renew it. I was infuriated by this call, but reminded myself that my passport was still at the house, so I kept my composure and suggested she use that instead. However, she continued to ask me to pick things up from the store while I was trying to live my life 20 minutes away. One would think she wouldn't want to inconvenience someone who was working, but that wasn't the case. In her defense, our basement had recently flooded due to plumbing issues, so it was reasonable for me to assist her with some tasks while ensuring that she felt comfortable with the workers in the house, particularly at night. Still, it did not excuse her persistent requests for wine and other items. By February, my mother's health was deteriorating. She was weak and would call me when my brother was at work to help her get in and out of bed or assist her in using the toilet. Her frailty was alarming. My brother, who still lived at home, helped her when he could. The turning point occurred on Super Bowl Sunday. While I was at home enjoying drinks with friends and watching the game, my brother called me 4 times. Typically, I tend to ignore his calls since he can be bothersome. However, when he called for the 5th time, I finally answered, only to hear that my mother was on the way to the emergency room. Her alcoholism had finally caught up to her. Concerned, I ordered an Uber to the hospital since I was too inebriated to drive. When I arrived, medical staff confirmed what we already feared. She had developed a wine belly. Thankfully, she has not consumed alcohol since that day. 15 days have passed since the incident, and she has regained much of her strength and is striving for independence again. She tells me she feels happier, which brings me joy. Nonetheless, she still calls me around 4 times a day to check on me and sends various texts in between. The conversations often feel repetitive, as nothing seems to change with my life. Despite this, I love her dearly and am genuinely pleased that she is making an effort to better herself. Thank you for taking the time to read this lengthy account. At this point, I would appreciate any advice on what steps to take next. It would be beneficial to hear perspectives from both my peers and older women. Summary: my relationship with my mother has become strained due to her alcoholism.